Have you ever lost something important not because of what you did, but because of what you said? A job interview that suddenly shifted. A friend who went quiet. A partner whose eyes changed after one offhand remark. Most people never notice the exact moment it happens, but it happens. And more often than we realize, that's because intelligence isn't measured by how much you say. It's measured by what you choose not to say. In this video, 7 things an intelligent person never says. We're not just exploring words, we're exposing blind spots. 7 common phrases that seem harmless, until they quietly sabotage your credibility, damage your relationships, and limit your potential. These are not cliches. They are unconscious patterns, deeply wired, quietly accepted. You've probably said them. We all have. So did Mason, a man who told himself for years, "I can't change," until he finally stopped talking and started transforming. So did Tina, who wore the mask of not caring what anyone thought until the loneliness caught up. So did Frank, who kept saying he deserved more until he learned to earn it instead. This is not a lecture, it's a mirror. A journey through everyday self-sabotage, filtered through the timeless clarity of Stoicism, because, as Epictetus once said, first, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. It all starts with self-awareness, and it begins the moment you stop repeating the wrong things. 1. I can't change. Mason sat alone in his car, hands clenched tightly on the steering wheel, breath fogging up the windshield under the glow of a flickering street lamp. The engine was off, but inside him, everything was roaring. For the 3rd night this week, he'd parked outside the same house, his old house where his ex-wife now lived with their daughter. He wouldn't go in. He hadn't for years. 15 years of drinking had taken that right away. And still, as he sat there in the silence, one sentence kept looping in his mind like a broken prayer. I can't change. It sounds harmless, honest even. But I can't change is not a reflection of truth. It's a verdict delivered too early, too absolutely. It shuts the door on every attempt, every possibility, and locks it from the inside. Most dangerously, it allows us to stay exactly where we are while feeling justified for doing so. Mason used to believe it too. After he lost his job, then his marriage, then the trust of his own daughter, he convinced himself it was all just who he was. It's in my blood, he'd say. My father drank. His father drank. This is just how I'm wired. That belief became a shield. It hurt less to say, I'm broken, than to admit, I've been choosing this. But there was a particular night when silence did something words couldn't. He was on the floor of a motel room, half-conscious, surrounded by empties and regrets. No lecture could have reached him. No advice. No inspiration. But when he finally stopped speaking, stopped justifying, stopped narrating his pain to anyone who'd listen, something unexpected emerged. Stillness, awareness, a voice that didn't come from outside, but from within. It didn't shout. It whispered, "This isn't who you are. It's who you've accepted." Stoic philosopher Epictetus once wrote in He Enchiridion, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of things." Mason had always seen himself as doomed, powerless, a victim of generational trauma, bad luck, and worse choices. But that night, lying on the motel floor, he looked at himself with a new gaze, not as broken, but as responsible, not as a victim, but as the author of every next step. The first step wasn't heroic, it wasn't pretty, it was quiet. He poured out the remaining bottles, not with drama, just resolve. He checked into a shelter, then a program. He made no announcements, no apologies yet, just small decisions, stacked daily, like bricks of a wall he was finally building, not smashing. For months, he didn't try to convince his ex-wife of anything. He didn't beg to see his daughter. He just worked, silently, relentlessly. 16 months later, he stood at that same doorstep, no longer as a ghost outside a life he'd lost, but as a man learning to return not to the past, but to himself. His daughter opened the door. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at him, really looked. He didn't say, "I've changed." He didn't need to. His presence said it all. This chapter isn't about Mason. It's about you, about all of us. We've all said it in some form. "I'm just like this. I can't help it. It's too late." But the truth is, nothing begins to change until you stop clinging to the comfort of that phrase. Change doesn't need perfection. It doesn't need confidence. It doesn't even need clarity. It just needs the courage to stop repeating the story that you can't. And make no mistake, change doesn't begin with grand gestures or viral breakthroughs. It often begins in silence, in choosing not to say, "I can't," even if you still don't know how you will. The Stoics didn't preach about becoming superhuman. They taught responsibility, self-mastery, the understanding that while we cannot control the world, we can always control our attitude and our actions. So the next time you hear yourself say, "I can't change," stop. Not just the words, stop the momentum behind them. Pause, look around. Is it truly impossible or just uncomfortable? Is it fate or habit? You may find that your life isn't trapped. It's paused, waiting for you to press a different button. Mason's life began to shift, not when he shouted for help, but when he stopped arguing with himself. That was the moment he made room for a better version to emerge. The rest, discipline, effort, and time. But none of it could begin until he deleted one sentence from his vocabulary. "I can't change" is the most seductive lie we tell ourselves. It's the ultimate escape clause, emotionally satisfying but existentially deadly. Reject it, replace it. Not with toxic positivity, but with quiet conviction. Try this instead. "I haven't changed yet, but I'm learning, and I'm willing." Because in the end, intelligence isn't about how much you know. It's about knowing that your story is not over. 2. I don't care what people think. Mason's story ended not with a declaration, but with a decision. The moment he stopped repeating, "I can't change," the world quietly began to shift around him. Not because the world changed, but because his posture toward it did. And now we turn the lens onto a more deceptive phrase, one that's worn like a badge of honor in today's culture, but underneath conceals a deeper wound. I don't care what people think. It sounds bold, fearless, empowered, but most of the time, it isn't any of those things. It's not strength, it's not detachment, it's armor. Tina, 28, was a marketing director in New York with a sharp mind, sharp tongue, and an even sharper online persona. On Instagram, she was the embodiment of confidence, aesthetic snapshots, unapologetic captions, and viral quotes like, "I'm not for everyone, and that's my power." She spoke often about boundaries, independence, and being above the noise. But in private, Tina was exhausted, anxious before meetings, obsessively rereading Slack messages, replaying what her boss said in one-on-one check-ins. She told the world she didn't care, yet her mind was a theater of second-guessing. Because here's the truth. Most people who loudly say, "I don't care what people think," are those who care the most. It's not confidence, it's a coping mechanism. In a hyper-connected world, we're all flooded with opinions, comparisons, and invisible expectations. The pressure to be liked, to appear invincible, to filter every flaw. And when that pressure becomes too much, some people break. Others pretend they're above it. But that mask comes at a cost. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings no benefit to the bee." In other words, we are part of a community. Trying to detach completely from the opinions of others isn't wisdom, it's alienation. Stoicism never taught us to ignore people. It taught us to not be controlled by them. Tina's turning point came not during a breakdown, but during a very quiet moment. After launching a major campaign that underperformed, her CEO asked for her honest thoughts in a closed-door meeting, and for the first time, Tina dropped the "I've got it together" script and admitted, "I honestly don't know what's not landing. I think I've stopped listening." Her boss didn't criticize her, he thanked her, and that broke something open. Over the weeks that followed, Tina began to recalibrate not her intelligence, but her listening. She still protected her time, still made decisions with clarity, but she asked more questions, gave space to voices she'd previously ignored, allowed feedback to come in not as judgment, but as data. She stopped shouting into the world that she didn't care, and started acting like someone who cared wisely. And what changed? Her team trusted her more. Her strategies became sharper. Her inner anxiety, oddly enough, began to soften. Not because she let go of herself, but because she let others in, just enough. And Tina wasn't the only one. Even Oprah Winfrey, in the early years of her success, was obsessed with ratings and public validation. She admitted in interviews that every negative comment, every dip in viewership, felt like a personal failure. But over time, she evolved not by pretending not to care, but by learning how to separate her worth from public approval. As she once said, "What I know for sure is that speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have, but it must begin with knowing it for yourself, not needing it from others." And that wisdom didn't make her colder, it made her clearer. The Stoics understood this paradox well. Seneca wrote, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a man who is alive." And the same applies to social fear. When you constantly fear the judgment of others, you become frozen. But when you pretend you're immune to it, you become blind. True wisdom doesn't swing between extremes. It lives in the balance. Let's be clear. Intelligent people do not live to please. They do not contort themselves for approval, but they also do not insult the intelligence of others by pretending to be untouchable. They listen, they observe, and they choose carefully what matters and what doesn't. The next time you feel tempted to say, "I don't care what they think," pause. Ask instead, "Am I avoiding their judgment or avoiding growth?" You'll know the difference by how defensive you feel. There is strength in filtering opinions, but there's also strength in knowing that you don't have to filter everything out, that some perspectives, 7 uncomfortable ones, are mirrors, not cages. Tina didn't lose her edge. She refined it. She learned that silence doesn't mean surrender, that openness doesn't mean weakness, and that intelligence isn't proven by resistance, but by discernment. In today's world, where everyone is broadcasting their independence, the real rebels are those who still choose to stay connected thoughtfully, intentionally, and without losing themselves. So let's be rebels, not escape artists. Because an intelligent person doesn't live to please, but they never live to disrespect. They know that greatness grows not in isolation, but in connection, and that the most powerful minds are the ones still willing to listen. 3. I already know that. We've just explored how claiming not to care about others can be a fragile disguise for fear. But now we turn to a phrase even more subtle yet arguably more dangerous. It's the kind of sentence that feels smart the moment it leaves your mouth. It signals knowledge, confidence, experience, or so we think. I already know that. It rolls off the tongue like a shield, effortless, smooth, and final. But beneath that polished exterior hides a silent killer, the end of learning. Jake was one of the brightest software engineers in his department, quick, analytical, and armed with the kind of technical memory that made him a favorite during code review. Sat first. But as the months went on, something shifted. His team stopped collaborating with him. His feedback sessions grew shorter, colder. New developers avoided asking him questions. It wasn't because he lacked knowledge. It was because of what he kept saying. I already know that. I read that last year. That's basic stuff. One afternoon, during a project post-mortem, a junior engineer suggested a simple optimization. Jake predictably dismissed it. Yeah, that's not new to me. The room fell quiet. But Naval Ravikant, a visiting mentor and entrepreneur in residence that day, leaned forward and asked calmly, "If you already know it, why haven't you applied it yet?" Jake didn't have an answer. That question cut through the performance of intelligence like a knife. Because real knowledge isn't about familiarity, it's about embodiment. If you knew it, you'd live it. If you understood it, it would show in your work, your words, your way of thinking. Seneca once wrote in letters to Lucilius, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." And that sentence alone dismantles the ego behind, "I already know that." The mistake Jake made is one we all make, especially when we're praised for being smart. We confuse exposure with mastery. Just because we've heard something doesn't mean we've integrated it. Just because we've read a book doesn't mean we've become its wisdom, and just because we can explain an idea doesn't mean we embody it under pressure. What Naval demonstrated that day wasn't just humility, it was intellectual honesty. This is a man who built, invested, and exited from multi-million-dollar companies, yet still asks questions like a student, still listens with curiosity, still finds truth in the mouths of interns, cashiers, Uber drivers, not because he doesn't know things, but because he knows how much he still doesn't know fully. That's the difference. Real intelligence doesn't need to prove itself. It's not threatened by repetition. It doesn't fear learning the same lesson twice, especially if the first time it wasn't truly learned. The Socratic methoda form of dialogue, where every assumption is questioned, it rests on this principle. When someone says, "I already know," the wise don't argue. They simply ask, "Then why hasn't it changed your life yet?" In that question lies the entire mirror. Jake, to his credit, didn't storm out. He sat back. He thought. And over the next few months, he began a different kind of journey, not one of accumulating new knowledge, but of applying old truths more deeply. He re-engaged with his team, not as their superior, but as their collaborator. He asked more than he answered, and he listened, truly listened, even when he'd heard something before. The results weren't immediate, but they were real. And ironically, he became the kind of leader people wanted to learn from, not because he knew more, but because he became teachable again. So the next time your reflex is to say, "I already know that," stop. Ask yourself, then why am I still struggling with it? Why hasn't it changed me yet? Why do I still need to hear it again? The answer might humble you, and that's a good thing, because humility is not weakness. It's the operating system of growth. Remember, the wisest people in the world don't accumulate information to dominate conversations. They do it to change themselves first. And that transformation is what others trust. So let's trade the need to be already informed for the willingness to be deeply transformed. The people who grow the most aren't the ones who know everything. They're the ones who stay open. Open to nuance, open to repetition, open to seeing the same truth again and again until it finally breaks through. Because sometimes hearing something for the 10th time is when it finally lands. It's not what you already know that will break you. It's what you keep postponing. 4. I don't have time. It's not what you already know that will break you. It's what you keep postponing. I don't have time. It sounds innocent, logical, even responsible. We say it to colleagues, friends, family, even to ourselves. But behind that phrase lies one of the most dangerous illusions in modern life, because more often than not, I don't have time doesn't mean I'm busy. It means this isn't a priority for me, and that, when we're honest, is a far more uncomfortable truth to sit with. Want proof? Check your phone, look at your screen time, see where your day went. Not your intentions, your reality. The time you claimed you didn't have is there, broken into 1,000 scrolls, taps, mindless switches between apps. We're not running out of time, we're leaking it in On the Shortness of Life. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." 2,000 years later, we still haven't learned. Daniel was 38, running a successful tech startup, and to anyone on the outside, he was killing it. Clients were happy, revenue growing, momentum strong. But at home, his 10-year-old son, Luke, was withdrawing. First, quietly, then visibly. Less eye contact, less energy, less sleep. Daniel noticed, but like everything else personal in his life, he filed it under later. He told himself, this is just a phase. I'll make it up to him on the weekend. I don't have time right now. Until the night he got a call from his wife from the emergency room. Luke had collapsed from extreme stress and dehydration. He'd been hiding his anxiety for months, trying not to bother Dad. The doctors said he was lucky. Daniel didn't feel lucky. He felt exposed. That night, he didn't sleep. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and opened his calendar, not to plan more meetings, but to confront a brutal question. What had he been saying yes to that forced him to say no to his own son? He didn't like the answers, but they were honest. He realized he'd been organizing his life around tasks, not truths, around noise, not meaning. His company had been thriving at the cost of his presence. His time hadn't been taken, it had been traded. And he's not alone. Best-selling author and modern Stoic Ryan Holiday once confessed that building a life of focus isn't about cramming more into the calendar, it's about learning what to subtract. In stillness is the key, he writes. People don't have time because they don't prioritize it. They are too busy doing things they shouldn't be doing. That idea hit Daniel like a mirror. Because his time hadn't disappeared. He had simply assigned it elsewhere, out of habit, out of ego, out of the illusion that everything was urgent. And that's the truth most people don't want to face. I don't have time isn't a fact. It's a pattern of misplaced priorities, fueled by urgency and guilt, but rarely examined. So here's the challenge. The next time you're about to say, I don't have time, replace it with the phrase, it's not important enough to me right now. If that makes you flinch, good. That's the point. It forces clarity. It forces choice. Daniel started small. He cancelled 2 weekly calls that added noise but no value. He blocked off 30 minutes each morning just to sit and have breakfast with his son. No phones, no rush, no agenda, just presence. At first, it felt strange, like he was breaking some invisible productivity rule. But over time, that time became sacred. It wasn't just about parenting. It was about reclaiming his ability to choose. The Stoics taught that control begins with perception. When you change the way you look at time, you change the way you use it. It stops being a constraint and becomes a canvas. And remember, this isn't just about parenting. It's about friendships you've neglected, books you've left unopened, dreams you've buried under the word someday. The intelligent person doesn't wait for time to appear. They carve it out with intention, with courage, with sacrifice. You don't need more hours. You need sharper priorities. Let me ask you, how many things on your calendar would you cancel if you knew someone you love had only 6 months left to live? Now, look again at your schedule. What's still worth it? Seneca said, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy." He wrote that almost 20 centuries ago. We have more tools, more planners, more automation than ever before, and yet we're still starving for time. Not because time is rare, but because our attention is scattered and our values aren't clear. Daniel didn't just change his calendar, he changed his language. He stopped saying, "I'm too busy." Instead, he started saying, "That's not a priority for me right now." And when that didn't feel right, he didn't blame his schedule, he changed it. That shift from blame to ownership is where real intelligence begins. So, the next time "I don't have time" is on the tip of your tongue, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what am I really avoiding? What matters that I've been treating like an afterthought? What would happen if I made space instead of excuses? Because at the end of your life, you won't remember the meetings, you'll remember the moments. And those moments are built-on choice at a time by people who are brave enough to stop being busy and start being present. Ready for the next one? The next sentence doesn't just waste time, it fractures connection, and it wears the mask of truth. 5. I'm just being honest. The most dangerous phrases are often the ones disguised as virtues, and none may be more misleading than this. I'm just being honest. End of quote. It's the kind of statement people throw into conversations like a grenade after they've said something sharp, cutting, or humiliating, and it always comes with the same justification. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was just telling the truth. But truth without compassion isn't clarity, it's cruelty. Clara, head of HR at a mid-sized tech firm, understood this in theory. She'd spent over a decade leading teams, giving feedback, managing performance. She believed in transparency, in accountability, in not sugarcoating the facts. But she also believed in people and knew that how you say something is just as important as what you say. Tom, a recent graduate and one of the company's youngest hires, didn't quite see it that way. He prided himself on being direct, no matter the cost. When a coworker missed a deadline, Tom called them out in the group chat. When an intern made a mistake in a report, he corrected them loudly during a team meeting. "I'm just being honest," he would say, shrugging. "They need to hear it." At first, people excused it. He was young, sharp, fast. But over time, his team grew tense around him. Conversations became guarded. Collaboration declined. Feedback sessions turned defensive. Clara noticed not just the drop in morale, but the subtle fractures in trust. So she invited Tom for coffee. No agenda, no reprimand, just two people talking. "I admire your intelligence," she began, "but have you noticed how quiet the room gets when you speak up?" Tom hesitated. "I just tell the truth. Isn't that what leadership's about?" Clara smiled gently. "Yes, but there's a difference between telling the truth and having it heard." She told him a story. A few years back, she had to let someone go. The numbers were clear. The data didn't lie. She could have said, "You failed to meet targets, and we're terminating your role." But she didn't. She sat down with him, looked him in the eyes and said, "This role isn't the right fit anymore, but your work ethic and honesty haven't gone unnoticed. Let's talk about how I can help you land somewhere that matches your strengths." Same truth, different tone, and because of it, they stayed connected. Months later, That same employee sent her a thank you note from his new job. That's when Tom's posture shifted. He didn't respond with sarcasm. He listened. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The truth is like a blade. To be effective, it must be guided with gentleness, or it will wound instead of cut." And that's the part most people miss. Truth is not a license. It's a responsibility. Clara didn't teach Tom to soften the truth. She taught him to frame it, to ask, is what I'm about to say true? Is it helpful? Is it the right time, the right tone, the right space? Because truth, in the wrong moment, becomes noise, and truth, delivered without empathy, becomes a wall, not a bridge. Tom began to shift. Slowly, quietly, he started pausing before speaking. He began asking questions instead of making statements. "What's your take on this?" Replaced. "Here's what's wrong." His feedback landed not with resistance, but with reflection. And for the first time, people sought him out not to avoid his fire, but to learn from his clarity, because he finally understood honesty that alienates is not strength. It's immaturity wearing a wise man's mask. Being honest doesn't mean being brutal, and being kind doesn't mean being fake. The two aren't opposites. In fact, when paired, they become powerful. So if you've ever caught yourself saying, "I'm just being honest," pause. Ask, am I trying to serve this persona? Just discharge my opinion? Am I making things better or just proving I'm right? Is this truth necessary, Noah? Am I using it as a weapon? The Stoics never told us to avoid truth. They told us to wield it wisely. A well-aimed word spoken with grace can change someone's life, but a careless truth, flung with pride, can damage what took years to build. The intelligent person doesn't measure their honesty by how unfiltered they are, but by how often their truth opens minds, softens hearts, and invites real conversation. Clara knew it, Tom learned it, and so can we. Because the truth is powerful, but only if it's heard. And the next sentence we explore, it doesn't shout, it isolates. It wears the mask of self-sufficiency, but hides a deeper wound. 6. I don't need anyone. Some truths require confrontation, others require compassion. And the most dangerous lies, they're the ones we tell ourselves when we're in pain, dressed as strength, hardened by pride. Imagine a woman climbing a mountain alone. Her pack is twice her weight. She's carrying food, gear, a tent, and a massive stone she refuses to put down. She's made it halfway. She won't ask for help. She doesn't trust that help will come without a price. So she climbs exhausted, defiant, admired from afar. But here's the question. Who's carrying the water? That was Jenny, 36 years old, mother of 2, divorced, working 2 jobs, managing school pickups, bills, homework, and the constant invisible weight of doing it all, alone. She was admired by her co-workers, her neighbors, even her family. She's so strong, they said. She doesn't need anyone. But they were wrong. She did. She just didn't know how to say it without feeling like she was failing. I don't need anyone became her survival mantra. It wasn't arrogance, it was armor. Armor forged in the fires of disappointment, of promises broken, of people who said they'd be there and weren't. So she stopped asking. She stopped expecting. She started believing that needing no one was the safest way to get through life. Until the day her youngest son, Liam, looked up at her after a late-night dinner and said, "Mom, you always look tired. Are you sad when we're not looking?" That cracked something open, not because it was new, but because it was honest, and she couldn't hide from it anymore. Jenny began to realize that her independence had morphed into isolation, that her strength had become a wall so thick, even love couldn't get in. And most painfully, that her kids were learning not just what she did but how she suffered. They were absorbing the message, don't ask, don't need, don't feel. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids. We are not meant to do life alone because we're weak, but because we are human. Stoicism is not about emotional isolation. It's about choosing your dependencies wisely, not denying them altogether. So Jenny did something radical. She let someone in. It wasn't dramatic, no breakdown, no grand confession. She simply called her sister and asked, "Can you take the boys next weekend? I just need a little time." Her voice trembled when she said it, not from weakness, but from the vulnerability of being seen. And here's the paradox. That one small act of asking didn't diminish her strength, it deepened it. Over time, she started saying yes to carpool offers. She stopped deflecting when friends said, "Let me know if you need anything." She actually let them know, not because she couldn't handle life, but because she no longer believed that handling everything alone made her more worthy of respect. That shift changed everything. Her kids started smiling more. She laughed again. Her energy didn't just return, it became contagious. Because she wasn't just surviving anymore, was modeling a new kind of strength, the kind that makes space for others, that says, I am enough on my own, but I am better with support. True intelligence is not self-sufficiency to the point of starvation. It's discernment, knowing who to let in, when to ask, and how to receive without shame. The myth of the self-made person is seductive, especially in a culture that idolizes independence. The Stoics never preached isolation. They spoke of community, of interdependence, of the wisdom in knowing we are part of a larger whole. You are not a solo warrior. You are one thread in a tapestry. Pull too hard to stand alone, and the whole thing begins to fray. Here's what Jenny came to understand. Strength isn't how much you carry. It's knowing when to put something down. It's knowing who can help hold it with you. And it's having the humility to say, I could use a hand, not because you've failed, but because you've finally stopped pretending that life was ever meant to be done solo. So, if you've ever said, I don't need anyone, I invite you to ask this. Who told you that needing others made you weak? And what would change if you stopped believing them? Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let someone in. Because intelligent people don't push everyone away to prove they're strong. They create space for the right people to stand beside them quietly, consistently, without conditions. And just like Jenny, they realize that true resilience isn't about carrying everything. It's about carrying what matters and letting go of what doesn't. The next chapter, it speaks to that final piece, letting go of entitlement and stepping fully into ownership. Because if the voice in your head is still saying, I deserve more, you may be asking the wrong question altogether. And once you've laid down the weight of doing it all alone, another burden quietly rises to the surface, the belief that life still owes you something. 7. I deserve more. If the last chapter taught us the courage to let others in, this one asks for something even more radical, the courage to let go of what we think we're owed. Few phrases sound as righteous and self-assured as, I deserve more. It's the kind of sentence that gets applause in motivational speeches, turns into slogans, and feels empowering when we say it out loud. But buried in that phrase is a subtle trap-hole that stalls growth and quietly drains us of responsibility. Because what we often mean is something more dangerous. I shouldn't have to change, but my life should. And that mindset keeps people stuck, bitter, waiting, hoping the world will eventually reward them for showing up. Frank was 45 when the pandemic swept through his city and erased the job he'd held for over 2 decades. He wasn't just unemployed, he was furious. Furious at the system, the government, younger workers who adapted faster. He sent resumes with little conviction, scrolled endlessly, and told anyone who'd listen, "I gave this company 15 years. I deserve better. I deserve more than unemployment. I deserve respect." But nothing changed. Until one afternoon, parked outside a grocery store, he overheard a teenager talking to his mom on FaceTime. The kid had just lost his summer job too, but instead of complaining, he said, "I'm thinking of selling my bike and running errands for neighbors, just something small. I'll make it work." It wasn't what the kid said. It was what Frank felt, shame, because in that moment, he saw the difference between expectation and initiative. That kid wasn't waiting for life to fix him. He was asking, "What can I do with what I have?" That night, Frank didn't sleep. But for once, it wasn't bitterness that kept him up. It was responsibility. And by morning, he did something different. He took inventory, not of what he'd lost, but of what he still had. A pickup truck, logistics experience, people, skills. Then he printed 20 flyers and offered grocery delivery to elderly neighbors. No app, no branding, just a phone number and a promise. Reliable, respectful, on time. It was small, it was humble, but it was his. And it grew. He didn't just recover income, he recovered authorship over his life. He's not the only one. David Goggins, once a depressed, overweight exterminator with a traumatic childhood, made a similar choice. He stopped saying, "I deserve better," and started asking, "What can I become if I give everything I have, no matter how unfair life has been?" In Can't Hurt Me, he writes, "You are in danger of living a life so comfortable and soft that you will die without ever realizing your true potential." That's the realization Frank woke up to. He stopped arguing with life and started building one. This is the transformation from "I deserve" to "I deliver." Well, from "Where's my reward?" to "What can I create?" As Epictetus wrote, "Live your life as if no one owes you anything, not even the gods." Because the moment you stop waiting for fairness, you start reaching for freedom. Entitlement whispers that effort should follow recognition, but Stoic wisdom insists, impact comes first. If your worth isn't being seen, shouting louder won't help, building something will. This doesn't mean settling for less. It means stepping into more. It means letting go of the idea that life is withholding something from you and embracing the possibility that you were meant to contribute, not to be catered to. And here's the paradox. When you stop demanding more and start becoming more, life often responds in kind. Frank's small delivery service became a community lifeline. It scaled. He trained others, expanded into new neighborhoods. And most of all, he found something no paycheck had ever given him: meaning. He stopped measuring his life by what he lacked. He began measuring it by what he gave. So ask yourself, what if you stopped asking, "What do I deserve?" and started asking, "What am I capable of building starting today?" That question carries movement, energy, ownership. It doesn't beg for permission. It hands you the pen and says, "Write." Too many people live their lives waiting for an apology from life. But Stoic wisdom says, life doesn't apologize. It invites. No guarantees, no rescue. Just an open door and a silent question. Will you walk through it? Maybe you didn't get what you deserved. Maybe you never will. But maybe you're meant to become the kind of person who builds what others only wish for. Frank didn't change because the world got fair. He changed because he stopped waiting. So now, it's your turn. Drop the story of what you're owed. Pick up the blueprint of what you can build and step into a life that doesn't wait to be handed anything. It's shaped daily by those willing to say, "I deserve nothing, but I'm willing to give everything." Because in the end, what makes a life powerful isn't the reward. It's the responsibility. You don't need to remember every line from today's video. You don't need to recall all 7 phrases word for word. What matters is that you remember just one thing. An intelligent person isn't defined by how much they say, but by their ability to pause, to choose the right words at the right time, to understand that true wisdom often sounds like silence. We've walked together through 7 powerful traps phrases that sound confident but often hide fear, frustration, or disconnection. Maybe you've caught yourself saying, "I can't change," or "I don't care what they think." Maybe you've whispered, "I deserve more," in moments of defeat. But the Stoics didn't teach us to speak louder. They taught us to think deeper, to recognize that words are not harmless. They are tools, and sometimes they are weapons. Used carelessly, they divide. Used wisely, they heal. So, ask yourself, honestly, which of these phrases has been shaping your life? And what would happen if you chose to leave it behind today? If something resonated with you, I invite you to share it. Not to impress anyone, but to declare your own shift. Write in the comments, "I used to say this, but today I choose to let it go." Like this video if it helped you see things differently. Subscribe if you're ready to keep growing, not louder, but wiser. And share it with someone who's walking their own path toward inner clarity. Because in the end, what you choose not to say might be what defines you most. As Pythagoras once said, "Be silent, or let your words be worth more than silence." Thank you for walking this quiet road with me. Now, speak only when it truly matters.